Hello, my name is Trish Ferguson and I'm an Associate Professor in English Literature at Liverpool Hope University. I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about my recent publication with UCD Press, which is a monograph on Maud Gonne, and just want to read you some excerpts to give you a flavour of what it's about. I became really interested in Gonne back in 2016 when we were commemorating the Easter Rising, and I was really struck by the fact that although there were commemorations that acknowledged the input of women in the Rising, that Maud Gonne was somewhat overlooked, and I was then to find out that she was actually in France at the time of the Rising. And in fact, she was deemed to be such an incendiary figure at that time that she wasn't able to get a passport. The British War Office refused her a passport when she wanted to return home after the death of her husband in the aftermath of the Rising. So I became really interested in her and found that she was a really important journalist, in fact, at the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century. And I looked into that. I read her autobiography, which was a really entertaining read. And then I visited archives and found out a lot more, looked at newspapers and saw her contributions. So I wrote this publication, which was published just last year, 2019. So I'm going to read you an excerpt from the introduction, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about her contribution to drama, which goes beyond Kathleen Houlihan. In 1937, as the people of the Irish state ratified the current Irish constitution, Maud Gonne committed to posterity her account of her contribution to the birth of a republic. Within this account of activism in the service of Ireland, Gonne gleefully tells a tale of a battle of wits between her and a neighbouring English family at a time when she was residing in France for health reasons, and also, she claimed, under threat of imprisonment if she returned to Ireland. From the balcony of her rented apartment, she hung an Irish flag to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Her neighbours reported the flag to the police, who asked Gonne to take it down, as it was illegal to fly any flag other than the French flag, and even this was only allowed on the 14th of July. They also complained that Gonne kept late hours, with visitors staying until the early morning. Failing to resolve the issue through the landlord, her neighbours bought a hunting horn and started making a lot of noise first thing in the morning. However, as this was also against French law, at Gonne's request, the police made them stop. The daughter of the family then started playing the violin at 7 a.m. each morning. Gonne then retaliated by staying up when the family had gone to bed, lifting a log from the fireplace and dropping it intermittently on the floor. When the landlord complained on behalf of the English family, Gonne acquired a note from a doctor she knew that read, "Mademoiselle Gonne suffered from a nervous complaint, and that whenever her sleep in the morning was disturbed in any way by any musical instrument, the nervous complaint caused her such shakiness of her hand that she was apt to drop anything she held, especially toward the evening when she tired." When the English family gave notice to quit the apartment, Gonne gave their address to hundreds of her student friends, telling them that the family residing were leaving and that they had a hunting horn and a violin for sale. So this anecdote, which Gonne recounts with relish in her autobiography, is actually beautifully characteristic of her, serving very well to illustrate how she loved to take tactics used against her, however trivial, and deploy them against her antagonist in a counter-war. Gonne's temperament made her eminently suited to engage in a propaganda battle with England. She laid out the scope of this battle in military terms. Lines of communication, she asserted, must be established between Ireland's children in America and Ireland's children at home, between France, the leader of the Celtic countries, and Ireland, the ancient centre of the Celtic race. Gonne took up her pen as her only available weapon early in her political career, when, following the advice of her lover, Lucien Millevoye, she left the practical work of helping evicted tenants in Ireland and turned her efforts instead toward publicising in French and American publications the condition of Ireland under British rule. In The Irish American and Their Influence in Irish Politics, Philip H. Bagnall argued that hostility expressed toward Ireland in descriptions of the Irish as demons, vermin, and scum in the London press, these rankled deeper than coercion acts and the treatment of Irish prisoners. Given that the American press took their information on Irish affairs from the English news agencies, Gonne sought to directly engage with the American press, embarking on 3 lecture tours of America in 1897, 1900, and 1901. In 1901, Gonne complained, "It's impossible for Irish Americans to know what is passing in Ireland. England controls the cables, England controls the news agencies, and the American press takes its news from news agencies or from correspondents living in London, who in their turn take their information of Irish affairs from English news agencies. I have read American accounts of events in Ireland so distorted that none would recognise them, and the distortion is always to the disadvantage of the nationalists. With her striking looks, wealth, and numerous contacts, Gonn was well placed to give her first-hand account of Ireland under British rule through the international press. Myra Comerford believed that there may not have been another person in all Ireland with the contacts she had abroad, and that there was no paper wall that she could not break through. As well as becoming one of the most prolific Irish nationalist writers of the early 20th century, Gonn was able to personally finance Arthur Griffith and Willie Rooney's nationalist paper, United Irishmen. She also went on to found and distribute Bon Éireann, a newspaper for nationalist Irish women, and Prison Bars, the organ of the Women's Prisoners Defence League, which highlighted the living conditions suffered by political prisoners, and she also campaigned for their release. In her final interview in 1953, as she looked back on her life, she noted that by the time a Liberal government in England pledged to end evictions and to bring in a Home Rule Bill, she had made a big breach in the wall of silence. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Gonn's contribution to drama in the late 19th and early 20th century, which goes beyond, as I said, her contribution to drama through Kathleen na Houlihan. I'll start by talking a little bit about Kathleen. So prior to Gonn's debut in Kathleen na Houlihan, Yeats had been concerned about the success of the play, but Myra Comerford later recorded that he need never have been under any illusion as to its effect on the young people who saw it. Never did a great poet ever have actors to interpret him who were so involved personally as the girls of Inina na HÉireann, Myra na Siúdla, Myra T. Quinn, Sarah Allgood, and the incomparable Maud Gonne. Comerford stated that the appeal of Ireland, depicted as the poor old woman, claimed and has had the service of my life. And she linked the transfiguration of Gonne that night to the transformation of Irish politics. In the audience that same night, or during the season, she noted, there must have been men and women who would soon take part in the Irish Revolution. Roger Casement might have been there, with Alice Stopford Green, Art O'Brien, future representative in London of the First Dáil Éireann, Sorcha McDermott, and Sis Sheehan of Cumann na mBan, the last two of my friends in jail afterwards, or Fintan Murphy, who helped in De Valera's escape from Lincoln Jail in 1919. Kathleen na Houlihan had such a success, Gonne recalled, that when we wanted to renew our contract at the end of the week for the hall, it was taken from us under the excuse that we were blocking the traffic, so many people had to be turned away every night. Audiences were so transfixed by the weird power of Gonne's enactment of woman as nation and the emotive force of the metaphor of the rejuvenation of the country through the blood of young men, that reviewer Stephen Gwynn wrote that the effect of Kathleen na Houlihan on me was that I went home asking myself if such plays should be produced unless one was prepared for people to go out to shoot and be shot. Although after 1916, Yeats famously asked, did that play of mine send out certain men the English shot? He later distanced himself from his influence in the rebellion, shifting responsibility to Gonne in his 1916 poem, No Second Troy. In this, he claimed that Gonne taught to ignorant men most violent ways. While the impact of the play on men has been well documented, less has been said about the significance of the play on its female audience and on their political involvement in the Rising. By literally placing women centre stage, Kathleen na Houlihan galvanised to action a number of members of Inina na HÉireann, whose participation in the nationalist movement was electrifyingly represented by Maud Gonne. Myra Comerford, for example, recorded, the play that mattered was Kathleen na Houlihan. That night, my fate was sealed, she said, my course in life set in the direction it was to take. She also noted the pervasive impact of the play on her contemporaries, noting that Helena Maloney, a founding member, and Maeve Kavanagh MacDougall went on to join the Irish Citizen Army. Elizabeth O'Farrell and Julia Grennan, who distinguished themselves as dispatch carriers from the GPO on Easter week 1916, had both been with Inina in the audience at the first performance of Kathleen na Houlihan in 1902. Yeats's views on God's impact may be accounted for not only by the power of her performance, but also her own more militant literary contribution to the National Theatre and literary revival after her success as Kathleen. In 1904, Gonne wrote Dawn, a one-act play with 3 tableaux, which was published in United Irishmen in 1904. As with Yeats's play, a female protagonist represents Mother Ireland. But while Yeats had shied away from religious imagery following accusations of heresy in response to the Countess Kathleen, Dawn draws much more extensively than Kathleen na Húlán on nationalist rising imagery, presented as an image of a sunburst in one of the 3 Fenian flags used in Easter Rising. Dawn is an explicit call to arms. The play's heroine advocates a militant response to the practice of evictions. Gonne may have found her inspiration for the play in Lady Jane Wilde's poem, The Dawn, which offers a mystical vision as thousands gather in might with the banner traced in the heart's blood, which flings out in flame words, liberty and right. The title of Gonne's play, Dawn, and its 3 tableaux, Sunset, Night and Dawn, are linked with the rising of violent sentiment, which intensifies over the course of the play into the resolve to rise up against the stranger and reclaim the land that has been stolen. Rejecting the possibility of availing of external aid from America on the grounds that those who go far come back too late, the heroine says to her dying daughter Bridgine, "The river of blood must flow, but there is freedom on the other side of it, and the strangers are driven away like clouds before the sun. Bridgine, it is you and the mighty dead who are driving back the clouds." Gonne saw the death toll of war as a necessary evil, as through the smoke and the fire and the darkness, life, light and regeneration will come. For the setting of Dawn, which takes place at an undisclosed location, at a ruined, roofless cottage by the roadside on the edge of a bog, Gonne drew on her own experience of famine, exacerbated by evictions in Belmullet and the scourge of relief works, which she documented in her journalism from 1898 to 1900. Here, Father Manelli told Gonne the prophecy of Brian Rua, that there would be a famine and a woman dressed in green would come and preach the revolt. After that, many men would rise and there would be fighting and many killed, but the English would in the end be driven out. According to the legend, Brian Rua died the day after he wrote down his prophecy. Gonne's play merges the prophecy with her own role as woman of the Sidhe, woman dressed in green in the roles of Bridgine, whose death prompts her mother to prophesy the red dawn of war as the only remedy to drive strangers from their land. The red dawn symbolism with which the play closes is explicitly linked with the image of the river of blood that is deemed necessary to attain freedom. Although considered an imitation of Kathleen na Húlán, Gonne uses powerful, radical, rising imagery as a much more central trope to Dawn, with Ella Young writing a lyric, The Red Sunrise, for it. Gonne understood that the power of Kathleen na Húlán came from her performance of the title role and the mythology that grew around her. Although there's no indication that she intended to cast herself for a role in a performance of Dawn, Gonne invoked one of her favourite images of the mythical queen in the play. Old Michael describes himself as only one of the little stones which keep her feet from sinking in the soft bog till she drives the stranger from her fields. There are many little stones that the feet of the queen have rested on, shining out across the bog. While in Kathleen na Húlán, suffering is implicit in the fact of the old woman having lost her land to her stranger, Dawn points directly to the effects of the stranger's actions with explicit reference to starvation and the condition of the work system. While the power of Yeats's play resides in its mysticism, the force of Dawn lies in its realism, as it draws on Gonne's personal experience of famine and evictions in Belmullet. Such force was more successfully delivered through Gonne's journalism, in which she invited the readers to share the shock of the vision in which she first encountered in Belmullet in 1898 through a powerful first-person narrative account. How few people realise what the distress in the West really means. I know I did not understand it when last week I gaily mounted a car at Ballina for the 40 miles drive to Belmullet, and now seated comfortably in the train, wrapped in furs with a good foot warmer, looking out on the green fields on my way back to Dublin, the remembrance of those crowds of famished creatures whose ragged garments fluttering in the wild Atlantic wind scarcely hid their gaunt limbs, and whose blue lips implored help, seems already to me like some terrible nightmare vision. The difference between Kathleen Ni Houlihan and Donn reflects the ideological conflict between Yeats and Donn over the cultural role of art. Yeats's later regret over his literary contribution to nationalist sentiment that culminated in the 1916 Easter Rising expresses the tension, by then largely resolved, between his desire to please Donn by furthering her cause and his wish to extricate himself as an artist from politics. Kathleen Ni Houlihan was, in fact, billed in Dublin for Easter week 1916, but it was not performed. As Yeats increasingly held to the art for art's sake manifesto of the modernist movement that he shared with Lady Gregory, Donn held to the art for propaganda side of the debate. She regretted the influence of Lady Gregory on Yeats, which meant no more poems against English kings' visits. She would later deeply resent Synge's depiction of the Irish in Playboy of the Western World, relating to John Quinn. I heard French people say, if the Irish peasants are such drunken, besotted creatures as that, England does well to oppress them. When Donn was published in October 1904, the leading figures in the Irish theatre movement were focused on the imminent opening of the Abbey Theatre. But in September 1903, Donn had resigned from her role as vice president because of infighting among the Irish theatre movement, explaining to Yeats, I won't undertake any but national fights, and the theatre company does not seem inclined for such fights. So that was the end of Donn's contribution to drama, but she continued to write for newspapers, and she continued to play a really important role in Irish politics. So I've documented this in my book on Maud Gonne. Hopefully you will have a chance to read it. You can buy it through UCD Press, and you can see a lot of other publications available there on UCD Press's website.